This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage.
Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. We enter week 5 of the college football season. Ohio State finally with a comfortable win in the 2021 campaign, a 59-7 victory over Akron. And now they head to Piscataway, New Jersey for a game that fans are not used to saying is going to be challenging, but trust me, it is going to be challenging. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights, coming off their first loss of the season, entered this game 3-1, but very much visibly improved under Greg Schiano. And if you look at all the metrics, definitely improved there as well. Greg Schiano's second stint with the program in year 2 very much seems to be turning it around. And to talk about what the Scarlet Knights bring as far as a challenge to Ohio State this weekend, we bring in the publisher of the Knight Report, Rivals Rutgers affiliate, Richie Schnyderite. Richie, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. It's a exciting time around Rutgers football. And like you said, it's going to be a challenge this Saturday. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And so for those of you listening who don't know, I actually obviously cover Ohio State for Buckeye Scoop. I also cover Rutgers for the Knight Report. So Richie and I work really closely together on that side of things. And this week is always interesting for me. And you know, traditionally over the last few years, it's been, I mean, last year was, Ohio State pretty much was in control of that game the whole way, but, Rutgers made it interesting, competitive at the end. But, when it comes to Ohio State fans, knowing Rutgers since they joined the Big Ten, it's been pretty lopsided. So I agree. It's going to be interesting that for the first time, and no one's saying Rutgers is going to win, but I think it is actually possible this year. And in years past, if you ever said that, you would have been laughed at. So, it's definitely going to be an interesting one. And it's going to be interesting for me kind of covering both teams this week to kind of see as we get closer to kickoff, how tenuous some of the posts on the board get. But, Richie, let's take a step back before we dive into the matchup. Third of the way through the season now, 4 weeks in, Rutgers is 3-1. Not just in their record, but in how they played on the field. Have they met expectations that you had? Have they exceeded them? Have they not lived up to them? As far as your expectations and I guess just general public media expectations, has Rutgers lived up to those in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 100%. I think most expected them to go 3-0 against teams like Syracuse, Temple, even Delaware. I didn't expect any of them to really put up a fight. Syracuse was a little closer than I think they might have liked it to be, but it is what it is. I think it was still 17-7 at the end of the day to win. The Michigan game, I think a lot of the media, especially me included, I thought that Rutgers run defense was awful based on last year's stats and based on the fact they gave up 100 and something yards to the Delaware starting running back the week before. So going against that rushing attack that Michigan has, I kind of was not optimistic at all. And then all of a sudden, they stopped them completely in the second half. I think they only gave up around 60, 70 yards. I forget the exact number in the second half against Michigan. And yeah, this is a very impressive team. The defense is phenomenal. I think they're top 10 in opposing points per game, giving up around, 13 and a half right now. That's a crazy number for this defense. There are a lot of veteran guys on defense. Now, in terms of offense, it's been up and down. Previously, I guess against Delaware, it was more up, where you had Noah Vedral throw for 300 yards. Then you look at the Syracuse game and it's like, what the heck's going on? Overall, it's based on offensive line play. If that offensive line can move a little bit or move the guys in the trenches a little bit, then you're going to get a good Rutgers offense. If not, you're going to get an ugly Rutgers offense. And you saw parts of both on Saturday against Michigan. So yeah, like I said before, it's a pretty much where we expected this team to be, maybe a little better than we expected.
Yeah, I would say honestly a little bit better than I expected. I had him at 3-1 at this point. I was probably one of the more optimistic people on the board. I think people thought I was being aggressive, saying 6-6 in a bowl, but I thought they'd win the first 3 games and they did. And yeah, I mean, to your point, I think I had them losing to Michigan, but before the game, I mean, you and I were texting and we both kind of thought that they were going to get rolled. And it was because of what you said. I thought Michigan's strength was running the football. And on the defensive side, their defensive line has been their strength. And I thought Rutgers' offensive line is a weak point. And I thought their run defense, seeing what they did against, or didn't do against Delaware, I thought that, Michigan wouldn't even have to throw a pass throughout the day. And it started off like that. I think, it started off a little ugly, but they buckled down and they did a really good job. So, 3-1 throughout the season. And now, I think they look a little bit better than people thought. And so some of those games, the at Northwestern, which I had as a loss peg before the year, that's a very, very winnable game at this point. And so I think you're looking at a team, their absolute ceiling, best thing considered, is probably still like 8-4, I would think. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of games that maybe people didn't think were winnable that are winnable. So I guess that leads me into my next question. Outside of forget the record, like who cares what they finish off at, like 5-7, 6-6, 4-8, like doesn't matter. But what is the biggest difference you're seeing in this program in year 2 of the Greg Schiano 2.0 era, versus not just last year, but obviously certainly the Chris Ash era. But I guess, even year to year, what's the differences that you've seen in year 2 of the Greg Schiano 2.0 era?
I think it's more or less just guys buying in, whether that's on defense, where you have this giant veteran presence that's all buying into Greg Schiano's mantra of just speed, speed, speed. And then on the flip side of the offense, it's the same thing. Sean Gleason wants speed. He's getting his offensive lineman to buy in. They just started a true second-year freshman right guard in Troy Rainey, who was playing defensive tackle last year. And he actually held up pretty well. And I think that's a sign that this offensive line is developing and more towards the guys just buying into this coaching staff, believing what they're preaching and believing what they're teaching them at the end of the day. Overall, it's a different regime, obviously, compared to Chris Ash, where it was a little less like strict, I guess you should say. But overall, it's under Greg, it's just been a whole mindset change and a culture change. I know that's like everyone's go-to word when there's a new coaching staff, but it's been a legit culture change. Guys are buying in the weight room, in the practice field. And overall, this is just a different Rutgers team, and they're not going to be a pushover anymore like they were under the previous regime.
Yeah, I think when you get rid of a coach and things aren't going well, I think the goal is a culture change, right? Something's not right. Like when Scott Frost left UCF, I don't think they needed a culture change. I think they just needed someone who could come in there, take the reins, continue the momentum and build on the momentum. When you talk about Rutgers, they needed a culture change. And if the guy who comes in can't successfully make that culture change, he's going to fail too, right? So that was Kyle Flood. Chris Ash came in after Kyle Flood and everyone was saying culture change. And he couldn't bring that culture change. I think he knew what he wanted to do, but he just couldn't execute it. Greg Schiano has been able to execute it, and he's done it very, very quickly. Whereas you said, I think, all 105 guys or whatever it is are fully bought in. And if you weren't bought in, you're not there anymore, or you won't be there much longer. So, that's definitely what I've seen. And I think it's going to be interesting because when Chris Ash teams played Ohio State teams, that game was over before the ball was even kicked off. Mentally they were just defeated. But, with OSU struggling a little bit to kind of find themselves and Rutgers playing well and believing that they can win any game, I think this one could be a little bit different. And so obviously I think we see a spread. We're used to 56, 30 something, 40 something point spreads. This one, depending on what book you look at, it's anywhere from like 15 to 17 points. I even saw one book open as low as 14.5 points. So, I think that speaks volumes when Las Vegas is making it a fairly close game. But what's the feeling in New Brunswick and Piscataway, when it comes to the chances Rutgers has to actually win this game?
Like I said in the beginning of this video, their defense is phenomenal this year, and I think that's going to keep them in a lot of games. Ideally, you got to score points at the end of the day. But if you can put up 21 points as your Rutgers, or maybe a 28 mark once in a while, that defense should be able to keep you in games. And the fan base is very energetic. They're very excited about this. It's not sold out, so to speak, just yet, but it looks like it's going to be very close, if not a full sellout on Saturday. Getting that crowd involved, getting the student section involved. This year they got banners in the student section for the Chop Squad and the Riot Squad and all the student, like I don't even know what to call them, the student
fan groups, I guess.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So they got there's a big feeling in Piscataway that this team might get a bowl game this year, and they're turning it around slowly. And actually, some might even argue it's been pretty quick of a turnaround already. This is a team that 2 years ago had 3 wins in 2 seasons. Now they had 3
no Big Ten wins. Yeah,
3 wins last season, all Big Ten. 3 wins this season. They look competitive against arguably, I know some of your fans might not want to hear this, but arguably maybe the best team in the Big Ten in Michigan. But yeah,
Well, as Jim Tressel liked to say, September's for pretenders and November's for contenders. And listen, I think Michigan did look good, but we've seen this story many times with Michigan where they've looked great in September and then they fade fast. We'll find out this weekend. They go to Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin doesn't look so hot themselves, at least on the offensive side of the ball. But if Michigan comes out of that game with a win, they got Penn State. We'll see. But Ohio State certainly doesn't look like the best team in the Big Ten right now. But as we said, it's a long season and November is really where we'll find out. But I do think, Rutgers going into Ann Arbor and, being in a position to win the game or at least tie the game and go to overtime in the fourth quarter, you could argue Rutgers should have won the game, that they were the better team, at least the last 45 minutes or so of that game. I think that anyone would say that that's super impressive versus where they were just 2 years ago. So
it's real quick. It's interesting because Greg Schiano brought it up today in today's presser. He even said like the Big Ten this year is going back to like comparing it to his NFL days. This is a wide open conference this year. Every game's winnable. It doesn't matter who you are. So, I mean, you never know what's going to happen on Saturday, but at the end of the day, I know the whole fan base, all of New Brunswick, Piscataway area, students, or everyone is very hyped about this game, and it's going to be exciting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, let's talk about the game. First, before we dive into, the Rutgers offense and defense, let's talk about the injury updates, suspension updates. Obviously, Rutgers, I think everyone saw the story. There was a paintball incident, starter. Max Melton, starting cornerback, and Chris Long, another defensive back, were suspended last week. What's the word? Are those guys going to be back? And then what other players are expected to be out due to injury or potential suspension?
So there's no official report from head coach Schiano. I don't expect him to really give one. He spoke with us today. I don't think he's going to speak with us for the rest of the week. Probably won't hear from him again, actually, until after Saturday's game. But from what I'm hearing, they're most likely not going to play this week. They might not even play next week against Michigan State. These two guys are probably out at the very least until their court case and court date is all settled and all that stuff that gets done. So you're probably going to be missing arguably your top cornerback again in Max Melton. However, last weekend, Patrice Rene, a UNC transfer who played the past 4 seasons at UNC, transferred in this offseason, former 4-star recruit. He is probably, I shouldn't say he's probably going to start, but he's going to play significant snaps. I expect him to go mostly nickel just because you're going to have to cover all these receivers from Ohio State somehow. He'll step up a little bit. You'll see a guy like Hassan Abram, who you're obviously very familiar with out of New York, Erasmus Hall. Injury-wise, Reggie Sutton, the right guard, like I said before, was marked out before the Michigan game last week. So he's out for the season, Schiano announced today. He has some kind of surgery coming up, another undisclosed injury. But other than that, they don't really release a full injury report for Rutgers. They kind of try to keep it quiet and just kind of don't say anything. Like Greg's old saying was always like, I don't know if you guys heard it at the Ohio State days, but anytime someone's injured, hey, Greg, what do you think of this guy? Is he healthy? No, he's got a leg. All right, well, thanks. Appreciate it. But yeah, there's not really much to report injury wise, but starting right guard is out. Starting cornerback Max Melton is most likely out, but not 100%. So it's more of a wait and see approach there.
Yeah. And let's talk about the offense a little bit to start off. What are the strengths of the unit? Where are their weaknesses and who are the key players to know?
It's hard to pin a strength on this unit right now. I know probably the biggest strength you can argue is their offensive coordinator, Sean Gleitman. Great in-game guy, great at creating those mismatches, and does a lot of pre-snap movements. He tries to get the ball in the playmaker's hands as quick as possible. And that's where Noah Vedral comes in. He's a super accurate quarterback, hits like that tier 1 and tier 2 very well, but struggles when it comes to that deep ball. But as long as he gets the ball in the playmaker's hands, like say an Isaiah Pacheco or at running back or wide receivers, Beau Melton or Aaron Cruikshank, you kind of just let those guys do their thing once they get in that open space and just try to get a couple yards out of it. But they don't get too crazy, nothing too fancy. So those would be kind of like the main guy I'd probably watch would be Beau Melton, as I'm sure most Ohio State fans are familiar with already. He's easily their top receiver over the past 3-4 seasons at this point. Explosive playmaker, big deep ball threat at times, and can kind of do it all. He's got a lot of speed. He's been used on end arounds. He's been used in just about any way possible. So I'd watch out for him. And then Isaiah Pacheco at running back runs like a bull in a china shop, as I say. Very ferocious runner. breaks tackles left and right. He's had his struggles early on in the season, but he's kind of picked up a little bit as of late. So he'll be one to watch this game, depending on if the offensive line can block for him or not.
Yeah, and to me, Beau Melton could play wide receiver at anywhere in the country,
Yeah.
and make plays. I think he's that good of a player. I think he's going to have an opportunity to play at the next level on Sundays, and he's definitely someone to watch. He did some damage against Ohio State a little bit last year, so definitely keep an eye out for Beau Melton. Now let's flip over to the defense. What are the strengths of this unit? What are some of the potential weaknesses or vulnerable spots? And then who are some of the key players to know?
So, I mean, if you would have talked to me last week, I would have said the rushing defense would have been their biggest weakness. But after watching them not manhandle, but manhandle Michigan in the second half of last week's game, I mean, that you could consider it a strength at this point, I would think. You saw guys like Alakunle Fadukasi, New York native, was a Dick Buckeyes semifinalist last year, absolutely dominate. He actually is, I think, second on the team in sacks, first on the team in forced fumbles, first on the team in tackles, future NFL written all over him. I don't know where he lands in that NFL draft, but I like to believe he's a top 10 linebacker around there. Ferocious sideline to sideline guy. After that, you probably look towards probably the interior on the defensive line and Julius Turner, who I don't know if most fans in college football probably saw. He got a very weird targeting call last week, got disqualified. But other than that, he's been very good all season long. He's undersized at like that 5'11", like 270 mark for a nose tackle. But he has great pad level, gets right up in there, and he's quick as hell. He gets right to that quarterback pretty quickly if he can break past either the center or the one of the guards. But he's a very good player. When it comes to the secondary, probably I'm trying to think out of the second, because Max Melton's not there, who's probably the number one cornerback on the team, leads the team in interceptions and pass deflections, but he's most likely going to miss the game. So I'd probably lean over towards Trey Avery, who had his up and downs against Michigan, but has been pretty good at cornerback for Rutgers all season long. He's kind of stepped up and taken over since Melton's been out at that number one corner role. Ohio State fans know him. I'm pretty sure he technically signed with Ohio State.
He did. He signed with Ohio State. He was Kareem Felder back then, and
Yes,
he
that's what it
changed his
was.
name to Trey Avery since then, and he signed with Ohio State. I don't know if he qualified or he got admitted into the school, something along those lines, but he ended up going a different way and then ultimately ended up at Rutgers, which he's playing pretty well there. So
yeah,
it worked out for all parties, I think.
Yeah, very good corner. He's been solid in one-on-one. Like I said, last week he struggled with a couple crossing routes here and there, but I guess that happens from time to time. But overall, he's been a very, very solid corner for Rutgers over the past, I want to say 3-4 years now at this point. So, I mean, those are probably the three names I'd watch the most. You can argue that a guy like a safety like Christian Izzian, who's another undersized dude, is very athletic, can probably out jump, I would think, most of the Big Ten wide receivers, if not all of the country. The guy has a crazy vertical, very athletic, has a very good feel for the ball when it's up in the air. He's one to watch, and there's not a ton of names, I guess, so to speak, but those would probably be the 3 to 4 I would probably keep an eye on if you're an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, for sure. And 03, Fadukasi, I think he's probably a middle round NFL guy, but I could see him sticking for a really long time. His brother, Foley Fadukasi, out of UConn, is a starter for the New York Jets, and he wasn't a heralded NFL prospect. And 03 is, to me, better than him. And I think he's going to be all over the field making plays for Rutgers throughout the season, not just this weekend.
Almost.
So, let's go keys to the game. So if Rutgers wants to win, what are their keys to the game?
That's a tough one. Just I guess basically keep doing what you've been doing. Play turnover-free football. You can't afford to let what happened last week in the first half, giving up. I want to say it was the first 2 drives for Michigan were immediate scores. Scored 10 points pretty much off the bat. They gave up 200-something yards to Michigan in the first half. You got to just slow down this Ohio State offense somehow. I know you're probably missing your number one cornerback, and that's going to be a huge pain in the neck for Schiano and crew, just because this Ohio State wide receiver core is ridiculous. But it's going to be tough to cover those guys, but you kind of just play smart football on the offensive side too. Don't turn it over. Noah Vedral, I don't think has a single interception this year at all. I think he's 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, been pretty accurate, almost 70% when it comes to throwing the ball. Just play smart football. Try to get the points where you can. I think the biggest difference maker here for Rutgers would probably be you're going to have to get some special teams plays if you want any shot of winning this game. And that's where a guy like Aaron Cruikshank, the Big Ten Return Man of the Year of 2020, is going to have to pull some magic out of a hat.
Yeah, and if I was Ohio State, I would keep it far away from Aaron Cruikshank however I possibly can. I watched him at Erasmus Hall. You saw him at Wisconsin, who he signed with out of high school. He was a great return guy. I think he returned one in the Rose Bowl against Oregon, and then he comes to Rutgers and he's just returned a bunch of punts and kicks already. He did some damage against Ohio State last year. I mean, that's how they made the game somewhat close at the end of the game. Is they had some special teams trickery and things along those lines. And Ohio State's going to be paying close attention to that this year for sure. But other than stopping Cruikshank or kicking the ball away from him, if you're Ohio State, what are the things you need to do to make sure you leave Piscataway with a win?
If you're Ohio State, that's a tough one. I never thought about it like that. Never thought of it from this point of view. But if you're Ohio State, you probably just attack the secondary. Like I said, the Rutgers is missing their number one cornerback most likely. If as long as he's out, I would attack that secondary. They're very undersized. Yeah, Patrice Rene is pretty good size at 6'1", 6'2" at corner. But again, he's on his second game since coming back, hasn't played since December of 2020. So I'd attack that secondary because you got guys like Hassan Abram, who's probably 5'9", 5'10"-ish. Very undersized.
5'10" might be generous, but yeah.
You have him, you have Patrice Rene coming off injury, you have Trey Avery, who's probably around the 5'11" mark. I'd attack all three of those secondary guys right away. And with the wide receiver core Ohio State has, they should be able to get open pretty easily, you would think. But then again, at the end of the day, this is a Schiano defense. They're riding pretty high on their high horse right now. Momentum's, as weird as it sounds after a loss, they have a lot of momentum behind them still. And this team thinks they could honestly win just about any game. And I think as long as Schiano's here, that's going to continue at Rutgers. And it's really going to make this game interesting. I think this first half will be really close. And then I do think Ohio State eventually wears them down in the trenches, and then it's going to just be a typical Rutgers Ohio State game.
Yeah, for me, without getting too far into Ohio State, their defensive line, I mean, they look great against Akron. That's not telling me much. I mean, they had 10 sacks, but before that, they had 2 sacks in their previous 3 games. And that was the group, a veteran-laden group that was supposed to kind of lead this defense and make the inexperienced back seven's life a lot easier. And they haven't been able to get pressure just as a 4-man rush. And I think that's the key is for me, it's Rutgers offensive line. We can't really are they bad? Are they good? Are they somewhere in between? I think we can't really tell. Yeah. And I think that's really going to be the matchup, the Rutgers offensive line versus the Ohio State defensive line, because I think if given time, I mean, Noah Vedral, I don't think he's that good, but he can hit the guys who are open. And I think if they give him time to figure out who's open, you give anyone enough time, someone's going to run open. Right. And so I think it goes both ways. Right. I mean, I know it's so cliche, it's going to be one on the line of scrimmage, but I think that's not only going to determine the winner, but potentially by how much, because I think if Ohio State is able to dominate that Rutgers offensive line, and, that really good Ohio State offensive line, and TreVeyon Henderson's able to run the ball and do kind of what they want there and make throwing the football a little bit easier, as you said, on that secondary. I think it could get ugly real quick, but I do expect Rutgers defensive line, at least for a half, if not more, to be really competitive. And, I haven't really gone to my prediction yet. I'm leaning toward an Ohio State, maybe 10-point win, something like that, 35-24, 35, something in that 11, 10-point range. But I need to dig in a little bit more, but how do you see this game playing out, and what's your prediction?
I mean, I kind of just gave it away. I just realized a little bit, but I think it's going to be a close game in the beginning. I think the first quarter, first half, I really think Rutgers might put up a fight to where it's probably a 1-possession game at the halftime, I would think. And then after that, I think eventually they're going to get worn down in the trenches. This is a team that needs a lot of help still when it comes to offensive line, even defensive line. They need a lot of help. They need a lot of they need playmakers still too. As what good as Beau Melton is and Cruikshank at times, they need other guys that other than those two. The defense needs some work, even though it's been very good, but it's more or less, I don't see this offense kicking on full cylinders against a full-blown Ohio State defense. Especially late game. So, I mean, I think Ohio State will win this. I don't have an exact score I want to say, but I do think that the Las Vegas spread's probably pretty close to accurate. I would say a 13-point game is probably Probably pretty good guess.
Yeah, you haven't seen the Ohio State defense play if you're worried about them.
I've been reading it too, so I haven't watched much of them yet, but
no, but they are making steps in the right direction. They made some changes. They've changed some scheme things around. They're disguising things better. And, I think as the young guys get more comfortable, it's only going to get tougher and tougher. But I will say, I do think Rutgers gets them at the right time. If they get them in November, I think it could be a very different type of game than it would be now. So I think they're absolutely getting them at the right time. I think actually playing Michigan close may play to their disadvantage because they're not going to catch Ohio State by surprise now. I think watching that film, I think Ohio State's going to see, but I think it comes down to the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's. And at the end of the day, if Ohio State takes care of the football, doesn't shoot themselves in the foot with dumb penalties and things like that, they should be able to win the game somewhat comfortably. But this team on defense, they made tons of mistakes this year. They made some dumb penalties that have been pretty costly, including in the loss to Oregon. And, if they do those things again, Rutgers, I think, I think the bet is for sure Rutgers first half, if you're going to place a wager on this one. And I think this is going to be a game at least going into the fourth quarter, if nothing else. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm going to be there. I think you're going to be there.
Yeah,
So
I'll be there. You're more optimistic than I am.
Yeah, excited to catch up with you. Excited to catch up with our Buckeye Scoop staff that's going to be on hand as well. But before we let you go, there's going to be a lot of Ohio State fans. I actually on our board, there's a ton that are coming in for the game. They're making a little trip of it, going to New York City, going to come to the game. Obviously, tons of local Ohio State alumni in the area also always come to this game. I still expect it to probably be like 75-25. Rutgers, and I do think it could be a sellout, if not close to a sellout. But what are the things you feel like for visiting fans coming from Ohio or all over the place for this game? What are the things like they have to do, whether it's on game day before the game, bars, tailgates, restaurants? I mean, tailgating is very NFL style at Rutgers, kind of tailgate set up all around the stadium, and the campus a little disjointed. Not everything's where the football stadium is, but for people who have access to be able to get around a little bit, what are the things that they have to do in the area?
Ooh, this is a tough one. If we're talking like, what are we talking? Like fancy food first? Are we going to go bars first? Like I got a whole list.
What are your recommendations? I mean, let's give like a few recommendations. Like if you were coming and you're like, this is your only time ever going to be at Rutgers. Like what are like 3 or 4 things like you have to do?
I mean, if you have the stomach for it, you have to go get the fat sandwich from Are You Hungry? It's, if you don't know what a fat sandwich is, it's just a giant sub roll with like mixture of chicken fingers, French fries, cheesesteak, onion rings. It's like all in one sandwich. That's one thing I feel like you kind of have to do. It's been on like Man versus Food and stuff like that.
So they used to have the grease trucks, but they got rid of them, and now I know they have Are You Hungry, which is one of the grease trucks as like a restaurant. Are there other like? I remember a couple years ago when I came to the game, there was like a food truck kind of near the stadium that had the fat sandwiches. Do you know if they still have those?
I haven't seen it in the first 2 home games they've had. So I mean, your best bet would probably be going to downtown New Brunswick and checking that out. There's a bunch of bars and restaurants along the way. Stuff Your Face, if you like Stromboli's, is a very, very good one. There's a bunch of other local, like most of the bars will be probably filled with college kids going on early before the game. So ideally, if you're going to go out over there, you probably might be a post-game type thing if you want that type of scenery. Other than that, there's very good like high-end, like fine dining type stuff. There's like Steakhouse 85 is a very, very good one. I know that's where they take the kids on official visits, so that's one to really watch out for if you like steak. Other than that, Catherine Lombardi's a really good Italian restaurant. You're in New Jersey, you're obviously going to get better Italian food than you'll get out in the Midwest. I hate to say it. It's a fact.
It's true.
But,
it's true. Especially pizza.
That was my next thing. Pizza. There's crispy pizza, which I know the staff is pretty high on. They also like Mancini's over there is pretty good. If you want to write any of these names down, you get a little notepad. Destination Dogs is one that's really interesting to me. I don't know if you've ever had it.
I haven't, but I saw it on the Big Ten Eats show. When they went to Rutgers, they went to Destination Dogs. So I threw that in our thread on our board, the recommendation to check that one out.
If you like hot dogs, it's really intriguing because they have all kinds of crazy ones. They throw all kinds of crazy toppings. I don't even know off the top of my head, like bacon, sauerkraut, all the basic ones, obviously.
Yeah, they have it based on destination. So like a Thai dog might be like peanut sauce and, I don't know, curry or whatever
They
it
have,
is.
they have like a Louisiana dog, and apparently it's like Gators dog or something. That's what they say.
Gator
I don't
meat.
know if it's actually
Yeah.
gator meat. Who knows? But I'm not even gonna get there. I could have made a really bad joke, but we're gonna hold off on that. Yeah, they have all kinds of stuff. They have a kangaroo dog too, which I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's for those of you in Columbus, very similar to Dirty Frank's, where they have a lot of different types of hot dogs with different types of toppings. I think it goes a little bit beyond that, a little bit more exotic, but yeah, those are all great suggestions. And then, I know, again, tailgating around the stadium. I'll be in the Scarlet Lot a little bit before the game, before we get into the stadium. I'll probably be heading to Are You Hungry with Tony Gerdeman, Kevin Noon, and Tom Moore, and we'll do a little scoop eats.
Oh, man, you guys bring the whole cast.
Yeah, you might have to get out there with us, but
100%. Yeah, let me know. But yeah, other than that, we're going back to tailgating real quick. I highly recommend getting there at least, like, I guess the game's at 3:30. Probably going to get there around like 11, 12-ish. You could probably catch a Scarlet Walk if you get there around like 11:30, 12, noonish. That's where all the entire football team, the coaches, they all walk in. They're surrounded by fans. They walk past the first game statue that obviously took place between Rutgers and Princeton. Other than that, it's kind of just a crazy good tailgating scene. A lot of Rutgers fans are usually very friendly. Even the student bases are pretty friendly too. And you could probably walk up to just about any tailgate and just join them, and they'll welcome you with open arms and ask for stories about Ohio State. And you guys could both talk about Chris Ash.
Yeah, for sure. Different experiences with Chris Ash, but one ended well for Ohio State, not so well for Rutgers. But you did get Greg Schiano back. We shared him too, so another talking point. But Rich, thanks for joining the show, man. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to jumping on your show later this week and seeing you this weekend at the game.
Can't wait.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.